Hello, Makai, and welcome to the meeting for the Committee on Investments and Land Management for Wednesday, April 1st, 2026. The time is now 10:35. I'm your chairperson, Keone Souza. We have Vice Chair, Mr. John Wahe IV. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Ahuna?
Here.
Trustee Kaka? Trustee Akina?
Aloha mai kākou.
Trustee Alapa? Trustee Galuteria? Chair Kahele?
Present.
Trustee Lindsay?
Present.
Trustee Waihe'e? Chair Souza?
Eo. All right, members, we have quorum. Mahalo. Now, joining the trustees today is Kaupo Nui Keishawn, along with numerous support staff. I'm going to call on Keishawn to announce the support staff joining us here today. Aloha, Keishawn.
Aloha kakayaka kako, mahalo nui, Chair, Vice Chair, and Trustees. This morning we have with us from administration our interim administrator and CEO Summer Silva, our investment director and interim CFO Ryan Lee, our general counsel Everett Ota, and we also have with us our IT systems engineer and administrator Daniel Santos. Mahalo nui.
Mahalo, Keishawn. All right, mahalo. This meeting can be viewed via live stream on OHA's website at www.oha.org/livestream and on Olelo. If you'd like to testify on any agenda item during the Zoom meeting, please raise your hand. When the item is announced, when called upon, you will be moved from attendee to panelist and given the ability to turn your camera on and unmute yourself during your testimony. Once you're finished, we ask that you mute your microphone and you return to attendee. Public testimony should be limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda. It will occur prior to any listed item's conclusion or vote. If you begin to address other issues not on today's meeting agenda, the ILM chair or vice chair will call you out of order and direct you to limit your testimony to items listed on the agenda. Testifiers' mics will be unmuted when it is your turn to testify. If you're not audible, you'll be muted and the next testifier will be called. Oral testimony online will be limited to 5 minutes. Your mic will be automatically muted once you have completed your oral testimony or if your allotted time for testimony expires. Please log off after testifying, otherwise staff may be forced to remove you. All right, members, our first item of business, approval of minutes from the Committee on Investment and Land Management dated February 18th, 2026. Do we have anyone signed up to testify?
No testifiers.
All right, members, any discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Ahuna?
Aye.
Trustee Kaka?
Aye.
Trustee Akina?
Aye.
Trustee Alapa? Trustee Galuteria?
Aye.
Chair Kahele?
Aye.
Trustee Lindsay? Trustee Waihe'e?
What we,
For minutes.
yes.
Mahalo. Chair Souza?
Aye.
Thank you.
Mahalo, Trustee Wahe'e and members. Next item on the agenda, status of OHA activities. I'm going to call up Ryan Lee and our partners from Pacific Investment Management Company, LLC, PIMCO, out of Newport Beach over there. Geopolitical market update and tactical opportunities, key themes and opportunities ahead. Anyone signed up to testify on this item?
No testifiers.
All right, seeing none. Aloha, guys. Welcome back.
Okay, aloha Michael Cole, Chair, Vice Chair, fellow trustees. We're pleased to have with us today Kevin Gray and Bill Murphy from PIMCO Investment Management. So they're one of our managers within the investment Native Hawaiian Trust Fund. They'll be sharing their perspectives on the economic outlook as well as the investment implications for their strategy. Kevin, Bill, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, well, aloha and good to see you all. My name is Kevin Gray. As mentioned, I'm a member of the client management team at PIMCO. We've had the good fortune of managing assets on behalf of OHA for a number of years and within the state of Hawaii going back to 1978. My colleague Bill Murphy and I are primary responsibility for that coverage. When we reached out to Ryan as we typically come to the islands about 3 or 4 times a year to see our various clients. He mentioned this meeting, and so we appreciate you all carving out just a few minutes to hear from us. And so our time is your time, so please do ask questions and prompt throughout. So just a quick background, because to make sure to level set on who we are as a firm. We manage about $2.2 trillion in assets. 2025 was a good year for PIMCO. We grew at about 15% year over year. Important to our clients, I believe, is that it was grown. We grew through diversification. We saw the diversification and growth across our fixed income platform, across our private markets platform, across our real assets platform. So really kind of hitting on all cylinders, which was very positive for us. And to the point of Ryan, we do manage the Tactical Opportunities Fund, which we'll talk about at the end of this. We're going to talk about our economic outlook, which is a bit funny to say because it's challenging in that there's a lot going on. And we recently hosted our cyclical forum, which we host 3 times a year, where we get together as a group of investment professionals in our headquarters in Newport Beach, California. We fly folks in from around the world, staff, and we debate what we believe are going to be the key themes that shape markets over the next 9 to 12 months. And we did that in early March, and you can imagine, very quickly thereafter, things changed. So what we're sharing is all in real time, and likely changing as we speak, but we will talk a bit about the outlook, and then we'll talk about the benefits of the Tactical Opportunities Fund in this environment. So Bill, maybe I'll turn to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So as we sat down and discussed kind of our cyclical outlook, as Kevin mentioned, which really characterizes what we expect from markets and economies over the next 6 to 12 months, we identified 3 key themes that we view as kind of most salient, most important, impactful to markets and economies. So those three key themes are geopolitical shocks, AI disruptions, and credit concerns. I'm sure you've seen headlines across all 3 of those themes. So the primary geopolitical shock that we're experiencing right now is clearly the war in Iran. This has led to significant disruptions within energy, oil markets, and it increases the risk of an economic environment called stagflation. The group here is likely familiar, but stagflation is characterized by increasing inflation at a time of slowing growth, rising unemployment, and it's really kind of a policymaker's, a central bank's worst nightmare. Typically, central banks look to cut interest rates to support growth, support employment, and they look to raise rates to fight inflation. In this environment, they have 2 opposing problems, and their toolbox doesn't solve either directly. So if they have surging inflation and they raise rates to try to fight that, well, that's going to be oppressive to growth. And so on either choice that they make, they kind of make the other side of the problem worse. And so what we're staring down is, if this, geopolitical conflict in Iran continues, you could have oil go even higher than it is today. It's at about $100 a barrel today. It could rise to $130 a barrel. That would have very, very significant lasting impact to growth across economies, which would lead to, bad economic outcomes for folks. And so that's kind of the tail risk that really puts central banks, policymakers, and markets in a difficult position. Obviously, growth is very related to the performance of risk assets like equities, like credit, and so it's a very, very important kind of factor to monitor. So that's kind of the first one. The second one is AI disruptions. AI disruptions cause winners. AI really causes winners and losers across countries, across corporate sectors, across consumers. High-skilled, senior white-collar workers tend to benefit very much from kind of the increased productivity of AI. Entry-level employees kind of doing more rote tasks may be displaced by AI. There's this broad sentiment in markets right now that people are characterizing as the K-shaped economy, where you have kind of this disparity between people that are doing very well and people that are doing less well. And that kind of K is widening on the back of AI. And perhaps more importantly, AI is leading to, real-time disruptions in markets. I'm sure you've seen the headlines around private credit funds. Private credit funds have lent to software companies, and those software companies have, their business model has been put at risk by AI, and you've seen kind of challenges to performance in some of those private credit funds, and you've seen significant pressure on those funds as it relates to meeting requests for redemptions. So some of those loans are illiquid as the fund managers have to sell those. That needs to be managed very, very carefully so that they can get investors the money back that they invested. So now we don't think that those credit concerns necessarily kind of cause widespread credit issues like you had in the global financial crisis in '08, but there will be localized stress. And I think this is where TAC Ops comes in. TAC Ops is the fund that you invest in with PIMCO. It is extremely well positioned to kind of take advantage of all of these dynamics that we just discussed, given its flexibility, its focus on quality, resilience, and hard asset coverage to date, and kind of the forward-looking opportunity set the fund's seeing. So I'll pause there. Kevin, you want to talk TAC Ops?
Yeah, I can give a quick update on TAC Ops, but want to see if there's any questions from the group.
Members, any questions? All right, seeing none. Kev, you can continue. Thank you.
Well, as Bill mentioned and I alluded to, a challenging environment when you look at just assets in general. Year to date, the S&P 500 given you down about 5% through yesterday. Bonds are about flat on the year, so it's been a tough start. But the environment is also quite interesting and lends itself very well to TAC Ops. So TAC Ops is a flexible credit strategy. It can invest in both public and private credit. So today that sits at about 60% public credit, 40% private credit. Now, year to date, the fund has been able to take advantage of the disruption, particularly that on the commodities supply shock that Bill alluded to. The fund's up about 9% preliminary net through this week. So not official numbers yet, but it's done quite well. And why is that? Because it has the resiliency, the flexibility to step into markets that are challenged, to be a provider of capital solutions when investors need it most. And so the fund has been around since 2013, and it's been able to benefit from that since its inception. But this start to the year is quite strong. It's quite compelling, and we enter this with a bit of liquidity in the portfolio at around 10%. And thank you. And the ability to play offense, which, anytime you see dynamic markets like this, the ability to play offense becomes very attractive. And so the fund is again, about 25% in hard asset specialty finance, about 20% in corporate exposure, and then the remainder between residential and commercial real estate. So, and then we sit with about 10% cash. So done quite well. Very excited about the forward-looking prospects for TAC Ops.
Right on. Members, any questions? Come on, Trustee Wahe. I know you have a question. Venture capital, private markets? No? Okay. Ryan, anything to add?
No, but just in terms of markets, right? As Kevin mentioned, it's been a tough and challenging market for financial markets in March. Estimates are for diversified portfolios are down like 3.5% to 4%.
Right on.
And I think that's just a really interesting point that Ryan makes is credit to you all to having the diversification, because anytime you have these challenging environments, one of the few things that can really benefit an allocator like yourselves is diversification. And it can be really hard in the face of the last, call it 5-7 years, where equities have done extremely well. We've all seen that year over year, and as an allocator, it's really hard sometimes to stay diversified to ensure that long-term your returns are meeting your expectations. So kudos to you all for maintaining that diversification and yeah, we look forward to an upcoming meeting where we can share more official updates on TAC Ops and the performance through Q1, but things are headed quite well.
Right on. Kev, Bill, Ryan, thanks for all you do. Oh, Trustee Galutario.
Yeah. I always ask this question, but how can we get our corpus up to $1 billion?
Yeah.
Change the spending policy? No. How do you respond to that question?
How do you get the portfolio up to $1 billion? It's a fair question. I don't know that I have the exact answer. I think you're not knowing your full spending policy and what your goals and objectives are. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I would say, you know, slow and steady is going to win the race. There is no magic bullet. We can't, we as investors can't necessarily create a market environment. What we can do is react to it, and having those flexible strategies that allows you to react to the environments in front of you, we think is critical, and in this environment, perhaps more so.
And I would just say, you know, it's going to be a function of that spending policy. It's going to be a function of your risk tolerance and how you use the tools available for you. I don't think that you have a lot of control over kind of, you know, the spending policy is what you set. You're going to want to spend what you know, want to and need to spend to serve your members best. You know, the risk tolerance is something that this board has to agree upon. But then the third thing is utilizing all of the toolkits, you know, available to you. That's what, you know, from our perspective, you have the most control over. So like Kevin mentioned, diversification is critical. It's what folks call the only free lunch in investing. Leveraging tools like capital efficiency where it makes sense, you know, leveraging the private markets, using liquidity as an asset, making sure that you're getting compensated when you do kind of lean into private markets, illiquidity, and making sure that, you know, you're keeping enough dry powder, if you will, kind of liquidity available such that when you do see dislocations, you're ready to step into it, and you have the governance structures in place such that, you know, this organization, this group here is ready to step into it when markets dislocate. And there aren't governance hurdles that prevent you from, you know, taking advantage of opportunities like that.
You know, one question. During geopolitical conflict that's going on now, what's the best way to approach it? Hunker down, look for an offensive maneuver, or what?
Yeah, I would say the best way to approach it is, you know, 6 months ago to have kind of done the pre-mortem, to have done all of the, you know, work that Ryan has done to, you know, identify, hey, what is the best portfolio for today, and kind of as an organization being ready to, you know, ride through that risk, not necessarily panic and take all of your chips off the table, and then being ready to, you know, kind of step back in and be a provider of liquidity kind of in the wake of any type of disruption, you know, geopolitical or otherwise.
Mauli Trustee Galutario. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but our portfolio, including real property, is about up to 910 million. Is that the recent number, give or take?
That's correct, with the recent appraisals factoring investment lands. That was as of December, right? So with financial markets moving, it's slightly below.
We'd hold the tech ops at 9%, going up from there. Trustee Galutario, we're almost at $1 billion, almost there. Trustee Ahuna?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I agree with everyone. Diversification is the key, you know, and as a coach, you know, the best offense is a great defense, and the way we have it set up right now, we can just, you know, just manage, right? So, but, you know, I wanted to ask if situations like what just happened in March, does it change our portfolio perspective? You know, like I've been watching the cryptocurrency, and I believe the Federal Reserve allowed Kraken, one of the crypto banks, to be a part of the Federal Reserve. I know you guys talked about central banks. Now it's trading on the NASDAQ, not doing as well. But how does that influence in crypto? Or what, I mean, is that something that we should be looking at too in the future?
I mean, crypto, we have seen some institutional allocators start to consider it, and we've seen a few even invest in it. It's a highly volatile asset that is somewhat diversifying versus other assets. I think there, are some analyses that point to kind of its correlation with, equity technology risk. We have seen more institution invest in the quote unquote picks and shovels associated with crypto. As of late, obviously investing in kind of data centers as part of AI infrastructure has been, like a very salient theme in markets. But 5 years ago, kind of a similar theme was investing in data centers to support crypto mining. And you've seen, like Kraken is an example of a crypto exchange that's kind of different from taking kind of long only kind of crypto risk. So another example of kind of the picks and shovels, but highly volatile, very risky asset that should be sized appropriately if you do decide to do anything there.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I just want to get to the point, because one of the points I'm trying to make is, how we invest. And we have this OHA card, that's why. And someday we want to have benefits. And I know that, digital currency works off blockchain and information and all this stuff. So I just, the way I'm thinking, and like someday, self-determination is but I'm talking about how we use money and what kind of money we use, and if that could be even part of something that we use here at OHA as a benefit, through digital currency. I think that could be a part of it, but that's just something I'm reaching right now. But I just wanted people to, I know people probably like, what is he saying? But anyway, I know some people out there understand what I'm trying to say.
I believe that technology is coming. So you that sort of tokenization, right, of records, right? That now it's just digitalized and you can't counterfeit it, right? So it is coming.
Yeah, and I'd only add that go back to it's a tool in the toolkit, right? And it's important that you assess the tools in the toolkit and what's right for your portfolio specifically at any given moment in time. And that's a broader conversation outside of this room, I think, or outside of this conversation. But I think that would be my only point.
Trustees, any more questions? Seeing none, mahalo Bill, Kevin, Ryan, thank you. See you guys soon. Aloha. All right, members. Members, and for members of the public as well, we're running a little behind schedule. The next meeting is supposed to start at 11 a.m. or immediately following ILM committee. But I just want to give everyone out there a heads up, especially if there are testifiers online or in the room. We'll be a little behind schedule, and we'll keep you updated as we move along. Mahalo. All right, members, for this next item, the chair is asking for unanimous consent to take the item 3C out of order to discuss the overall Kaka Makai project before discussing the specific elements within it. Are there any objections? All right, seeing none, we will proceed with item 3C. Now, members, this is an informational briefing on Kaka Makai, summary of Hawaii Community Development Authority, HCDA, Community Visioning Workshop on March 7, 2026, Land Assets Division. So at this time, I'm going to call on Daniel Senemeyer. He's online. Aloha, Daniel.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, trustees.
Wait, Daniel, real quick. Just want to make sure there's no testifiers. Okay,
No.
seeing none. Daniel, you may continue.
Thank you. All right, so thanks for introducing the topic. This was a workshop led by the Hawaii Community Development Authority on March 7th. a few of you trustees were able to attend. There were about 120 people overall that signed up and attended. So good turnout, good participation, very well run as a community workshop. It was at Salt Barn. So again, good structure, good facilitation, no drama, and strong engagement. Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's a slide deck. So next slide, please. This shows the project timeline. So where we are in HCDA's overall rulemaking process. HCDA is reaching back into the community to revisit the rules. Right now we're in a planning, well, we're wrapping up with a scenario, phase 1 visioning constraints analysis, which is where they reach into the community. From here, they move into the next step, which is scenario development and vetting, and then they'll start the plan development following that. By the time we reach the end of the year and we start the next ledge session, hopefully we're into rulemaking, implementation, and revisiting some of the major changes we're hoping to get into the rules, primarily housing. Next slide, please. So the workshop broke into separate focus areas where people could voluntarily move in between them and have discussions and raise concerns. I'm not going to read all of these out, but it covers the whole gamut from land ownership to what kinds of constraints are there. Yeah, and you can see there's a broad, everything from environmental to how the community is going to live, work, and play in this area. Next slide. Feedback was given both at the stations, and then we were all invited to list a concern, which was facilitated by a group that put it up on a huge mural, capturing and grouping different families of concerns: housing, culture, local businesses, community events and gatherings. Park access was important, walkability and open space, safety and security, as well as ocean access, and the focus on making this a Hawaiian place, the sense of place for Hawaiians, and finally climate protection. So next slide. The feedback asked the question, I hope someone visiting Kaka Makai in 2055 would look back and say, I'm glad they planned for ... And those are all of the different aspirations of what people are so happy that things were planned for. So that's what we're entering into as we start to talk about what's possible at Kaka Makai. I should say that this is all the same stuff we've been talking about at Kaka Makai since 2012 at least. And our final slide. So the next steps, HCDA will continue engagement and keep the online comment period open up until for a month, so next week. Then they're going to move into the scenario and plan development, followed by the draft development rules. And again, the implementation, HCDA will be leading this effort. OHA is there as a landowner and a supporter, but HCDA is the one running this effort. So we're there to engage with the community, explain our position about mostly housing, following the rules, heights and density, and just being a good, active community partner. From there, I can take any questions.
Members, any questions for Daniel? Right, seeing none, I would like to point out that Trustee Waihe was there along with Chair Merida Lindsay and Trustee Galutaria, myself as well. And I think there's some good conversations, Dan, especially the breakout sessions, especially ones including the landowners. And I think we're seeing a shift. I just want to put it out there. And if our friend Craig Nakamoto is watching and his team, I think they did a great job, along with Rachel Wong and Keone Kuoha, bringing different perspectives and educating the community. I think was very important. And as far as the housing aspect and certain things that maybe they see fit for their those lands across the street. So I think it was a good start. and looking forward to continuing the conversation with HCDA as well as the community out there and the different stakeholders. Sorry, Dan, I think you're going to add something.
No, I was just going to echo that sentiment. And yeah, thank you for showing up, Chair, and a number of trustees. That does make a difference. People see that in the community, and they appreciate it.
Right on.
So, thank you.
I see Paul online as well. Paul, you have anything to add? Paul was there. Paul flew in for that event. And Linda
No,
as well.
I think it was a really great discussion. I thought that there was a lot of divergent opinions, but there was certainly a vocal voice that would like to see housing in this area and other uses and make this a thriving part of the urban landscape as opposed to what it is today. So I think it's productive, and we'll see what comes out of it over the next couple of months. And, you know, it's important for OHA to continue to stay engaged in this process, and with Daniel's leadership and the trustees' involvement and others within the organization, I know that'll continue. But you know, we're still at the start of this process and a bit ways to go.
All right, mahalo Paul, mahalo Daniel. Members, if there are no other questions, thank you to our land director and his team. All right, we're going to move on now. The next item on the agenda, now we're going to go to B, members, new business, Native Hawaiian Cultural Center Feasibility Study, Interim Project Report by AEA Consulting. Anyone signed up to testify?
No testifiers.
All right. Seeing none, I'm going to call on Daniel again, I believe. You can introduce Daniel, Jess, and Catalina online.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm going to do, Daniel. Sandemeyer will exactly. Daniel Sandemeyer will introduce Daniel Payne at AEA. He'll introduce his team, and they'll run through an update of the Cultural Center. So, Daniel, take it away, and I'll go mute. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Vice Chair. Thanks, trustees. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Thanks for the opportunity to come present about some of the work we've done so far as a part of the feasibility work for a potential Native Hawaiian Cultural Center. I'm here with my colleagues Catalina Casas and Jess Nickelman, who have been part of the team who has been working on this project with myself. And it's been a pleasure over the last 3 months or so now to get to know more about sort of the opportunities and possibilities, and we'll share more about some of what we've learned along the way in service of developing the potential concept for a cultural center, and then onward into a fuller feasibility study. So you can go to the next slide, whoever's running this presentation. What we want to share today is some about the work that we've done so far during this project, and there's two main areas. One is a broader market assessment looking at some of the strengths of Native Hawaiian culture representation and spaces and organizations where there may be gaps, and therefore some opportunities for the cultural center that we've been focusing on, and then share some of the takeaways from the consultations that we've been doing over the last few months, including with yourselves, trustees, but also many others around the Native Hawaiian community. And then we'll share what happens from here as part of this work. And you can go to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jess, who's been spearheading a lot of the work on the market assessment, and she will report on some of what we've found very briefly.
Yeah, aloha, everyone. If you wouldn't mind hopping to the next slide, please. So the market assessment, amongst other things, focused on mapping cultural organizations in Honolulu and Oahu, in order to identify the strength of what's already there, opportunities, based on what's missing or what there could be more of, and synergies with existing organizations. We looked at Kaka, Makai, of course, and then we focused on downtown and also Waikiki and the southern side of Honolulu. So amongst strengths in the current cultural offering, we found youth programming, You have Kupu and the Liwakalani Center nearby. Entrepreneur maker space, I think that's a space that's been developing and growing in Honolulu. Workforce development, commercial kitchen space, and research, biology, and medicine. And a lot of these strengths are focused specifically in Kaka Makai with organizations already there that focus on the youth, developing them in terms of the relationship with the land and real life skills, and then also professional development and academics with Cancer Center and JAPSOM. Opportunities for growth in the current cultural offering include more Native Hawaiian focused performance spaces that are not, more geared towards visitors and tourists, specifically for Native Hawaiian audience and for Native Hawaiian performers. More living art and cultural practice space. In terms of nonprofits nearby, there's the Pa'i Foundation, but there's definitely an opportunity to provide more of that reliable and dedicated space for living practices. There's a need for more immersive storytelling and activation of collections, language immersion and instruction, and spaces where people across generations can come, occupy space, and share stories. Emerging from these and looking at the organizations in Honolulu, there are a number of synergies. These are just a few. I'm sure there are more that could be imagined based on everyone's specific knowledge, but the first one would be collaborating programmatically with other organizations to reinterpret stories. There are lots of unactivated collections, especially when you think of the Bishop Museum, and there are opportunities to bring those to life with new voices telling stories around them. There's the opportunity to provide accessible support and showcase the work of other organizations, especially in the performing arts. A Native Hawaiian Cultural Center might be a place to showcase continued Hawaiian excellence and to tell stories around what's being done across the island and the islands. That's pushing culture forward, happening now. Cultural Center can become a third space for people who live nearby or who might live in Kaka'ako moving forward. And hopefully it would become, one of a few choice destinations for Native Hawaiians who visit Honolulu, either from the continental United States or from other islands. And I'll pass it on back to Catalina, I believe.
Thanks, Jess. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So this really connects well to what we were hearing, what we heard in some of the consultations that we had, as well as a staff survey, an OHA staff survey that was issued. Consultation process included having conversations, individual conversations, as well as group conversations with civic leaders, community leaders, different cultural organizations, as well as other key members of the community. And what we did was ask them, their perspective on what a Native Hawaiian Cultural Center would look like. What are some of the key elements? What's crucial? What are some things to be concerned about or to take into account as OHA continues to evaluate this? And so we just wanted to share some of those insights and some of the feedback that we heard from those conversations. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So when it comes to the core vision, Jess touched on this a little bit, which is really thinking about this space being very vibrant, full of life, not being a static museum or a place that's just showcasing things behind glass, but really bringing to life Native Hawaiian cultural practices. And that also includes really embedding the Hawaiian worldview, this earth, sea, sky, into both the structure and design of the space, but also into the programming as well. And that also includes highlighting Hawaiian excellence across different areas, right? So that includes technology, astronomy, agriculture, voyaging, different art forms, and a variety of other things to really inspire future generations and continue to build upon that shared experience of passing down knowledge across generations. Jess mentioned this as well. The language should be embedded throughout. It should be a crucial part of this kind of space. There should be spaces for gathering, and it should feel like a welcoming space that brings together people, allows them to come together around different subjects, different practices, really centering healing, advocacy, and connection, as well as honoring traditions while making space for new and contemporary expressions of Hawaiian culture. In terms of audiences, again, this idea of being a welcoming and inclusive space was pretty predominant in the conversations that we had. However, of course, the space should be Hawaiian-led and Hawaiian first, really centering the people of Hawaii, and making sure that it's really grounded in the culture while still being a welcoming space and really reflecting the spirit of aloha. As Jess mentioned as well, this idea of being a space where different generations come together is key, from the keiki to the kupuna, making sure that there are both spaces as well as programs that really foster those connections across generations. And then the idea of bringing tourists into the mix was one with different perspectives. There are people who feel like the space should be more or less opening to tourists. But fundamentally, there is, I think, a desire or an openness to welcoming tourists and providing an opportunity for them to learn more about the culture while not explicitly catering to them. As we know, place-based storytelling is key and a key part of Hawaiian culture. And so this is also one of the main things that came up, and making sure that the location itself, the connection to the land, the historical significance are all really brought into the place and the programming, and the center should tell those stories and make sure that that's not separate from whatever else is taking place in the space. In the case of this area that we're looking at, generally in Kaka, thinking about the ocean and different practices that could be connected to that should be highlighted. So voyaging, surfing, navigation, making sure that if this center were to be located very close to the water, that there is functional waterfront access, so docks, ramps, a canoe house, to be able to make it accessible and usable for people who are using the space. And then really just making sure that it feels Hawaiian, and it's Hawaiian in its identity. So both in the design and the native plants, being a sustainable building, and making sure that, again, those values of really preserving and taking care of the land are centered to the space and the programming. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. We also asked about programming and activities that could be crucial to a place like this. And some of what we heard, again, really thinking about the living arts, so hula and mele, having dedicated spaces and programs for rehearsals and performances. As Jess mentioned, there are a variety of organizations and cultural organizations across the island that are already doing amazing work across these areas, but they may be in need of space, additional space to rehearse or to perform. Also, the location may just be more accessible to other people to be able to come to these kinds of events. So that's something that came up. Also, healing knowledge classes and workshops, whether that's through looking at native plants or through other kinds of practices, large-scale concerts and showcases, voyaging and maritime activities, storytelling and knowledge sharing, immersive experiences that allow people to experience the past in an engaging and immersive way. I love mentioning this example because it came twice in two very different conversations, but there were people that mentioned this Soarin' ride at Epcot, if any of you have been to it and are familiar with it, but this sort of immersive experience where you feel like you're flying, but in this case, it could be being in a canoe or something like that. And so something that really makes people feel like they're part of those different practices. Also, workforce development programs came up as something important, making sure that youth is, there's a youth focus across programs, and making sure that we're also connecting to workforce opportunities as well. Wellness programs offered through collaborations with health organizations and universities. As Jess mentioned, there are a lot of universities in that area doing some level of programming. or hospitals. And so could there be collaborations there, or just with other universities or organizations across the island? And then, of course, making sure that the commercial kitchen is put to good use through traditional food preparation, and giving people opportunities to use that space, as well as potentially having some kind of food and beverage activation as well. And I'll pass it on to Daniel now.
Thanks, Catalina. So what might this mean for an emerging concept for a center? And to be clear, this doesn't mean that we'll have every single one of these spaces or every single one of these programs that Catalina just mentioned in what results here. There's a process that takes all this input and puts it together with financial projections to make sure that the outcomes are right-sized and sustainable from an operating perspective. But it has been helpful to hear from the many places of input that we've gotten so far about what sorts of spaces might be desired or what sorts of programs might be desired. So from a space perspective, certainly to accommodate some of the things that Catalina just talked about, thinking about large and flexible gathering and performance space that are designed for Hawaiian practice in particular, and taking into account what is needed to allow the culture to continue to blossom and not just sort of look back, but also carry those forward and accommodate new forms of contemporary practice. There are ceremonial and protocol spaces that are important to make this a place that is a focal point for welcoming others who may be coming to this part of the landscape, and so those should be incorporated as well. There's also some desire for a smaller, more intimate venue to host, smaller performances that happen, or small groups that may come in and want to think about cultural practices that they're exploring and working on. Similarly, practice and rehearsal spaces that allow for the development of this work. We've got archives. I think that was one of the things we talked about. This we talked about sort of looking forward with some of this work, but that comes with an understanding of the past, and so thinking about what is what can be collected, what needs to be stored and kept well in these spaces is important for people. And then from a more commercial perspective, a retail space, but that's really focused on Native Hawaiian creators and producers, a commercial kitchen that Catalina just talked about, and then looking, into the landscape, creating gardens with medicinal or other edible plants that can be used in the workshops or used in the kitchen, and other amenities, and then certainly what we hear, not just in this project, but in lots of projects, make sure we can get there, that there's adequate parking or other connections or transportation that allow people to make use of the center. We've also talked to people relatively explicitly about the need for revenue generation as a part of this. This is a space that needs to be fundable and sustainable from a financial perspective, as well as an ecological perspective and a programmatic perspective. And so thinking with people about what are the right things that might be able to generate some funds outside of a purely philanthropic context. And what we've heard are ticketed events, experiences, classes, which could be subsidized or free for Native Hawaiians, but bring in funds for others who are guests, tourists to come have some of these experiences as well. There might also be an associated membership model with some of these things that could be valuable. Certainly doing rentals and spaces like this for corporate events, weddings, performances, rehearsal space. This obviously depends on precise location and where the center lands, but there's certainly lots of opportunity for that around Honolulu. We talked about a market or retail spaces that showcase Native Hawaiian artisans and crafts that blends with the retail space I mentioned earlier. That certainly could be opportunity for revenue generation, not just for the center, but for the artisans and craftspeople who are making those things as well. a restaurant or other food and beverage activation, renting out the commercial kitchen, whether that's for caterers or other people who might make use of it. And then lastly, a few people also mentioned an opportunity for a farmer's market. Again, building out some of that connection to the landscape and building on the existing farmer's market and Kaka that's there. So these are just some of the ideas that that have come up in these conversations that we're thinking about how we take this forward as the process continues. And you can go to the next slide. There's lots of positive here. There's lots of great opportunities that we've heard about and want to continue to develop, but there are also challenges and concerns, as there are in many of these projects that we've worked on over the years. And we want to address these head on. These are not things just to, dodge around, but they're important that we're taking these into the planning process as we go. So, first and foremost, there's a cost of maintaining and operating a cultural facility like this. There is opportunity for revenue generation, as we've talked about. But usually, what you find when you look at these is that there's more cost than revenue generation. And so, thinking about how the project as a whole can be sustainable. And we've talked about some, potentially smart ideas about how to, connect it to other spaces or build out partnerships that might reduce some of the cost of operating a facility like this. Similarly, if it's on the waterfront, as Catalina mentioned, that brings its own special concerns that we need to be thinking about. So while the feasibility study we're doing is somewhat agnostic on the specific site, we do want to be mindful that there are sites that could be under consideration that bring that additional element of cost and upkeep along with it. There are needs to make sure this is a distinctive element. In part, that's why we're doing this work. That's why the sorts of things that Jess talked about earlier in the presentation are so important, so that we're not duplicating things that already exist, but providing a distinctive element within the cultural ecology of Honolulu and Hawaii. So that's something we're thinking about and making sure that what comes out of this can be highlighted as something that is distinctive and that is valuable for the culture there. We would note that perhaps hard to say to this group, but we do have to acknowledge that I think past stalled efforts around things like this make people slightly hesitant about, okay, what's the ability to execute on this project? This isn't the first idea that this concept has come up. We've heard about others in the course of this work, even others that have had some ongoing planning around them. And so making sure that when we talk about this, we're also talking about, okay, what's realistic? What can we do that can help keep the promises around a project like this? And from an OHA perspective, also how it addresses others' issues of concern. I think, a cultural center is people are broadly excited about, but they also say there's other priorities. And you all know there's other priorities that OHA has, thinking about Native Hawaiians and the beneficiaries that you serve. And so making sure that we're thinking about with those elements, the programmatic elements in particular, but even the spaces that are being created, how those can link into other issues of concerns. And that helps us align, ultimately a diverse set of stakeholders who have different areas of interest around a shared vision that it can serve multiple things, multiple audiences, multiple peoples along the way. And then the last two, I think we've talked about, but bleed into some of those broader concerns that we've heard about this space. That there's a risk of commercialization. People don't want this to be a tourist trap, and that's why we've talked about the audiences being, Hawaiian first. Not that it's not welcoming for others, but it's really here to serve Native Hawaiian people and also therefore led by Native Hawaiian people looking forward, so that audience is in focus, and those who are running it are accountable back to others. And then, there is a sense of, if it were in the Kaka area that we broadly talked about, there's a sense of security and managing homelessness and safety that has come up in some people's minds. That I suspect has also been something that's come up in some of the broader conversations. And as the overall area continues to develop, maybe less of a concern, but where things sit right now, it still comes to mind for people. So that's a brief summary of where we've been as a part of this work over the last 2 or 3 months. Obviously, there's a lot more, and we've talked to you all, trustees, about some of this work, and so you've shared even more things that have been helpful in steering us. You can go to the next slide, and so just to say a word about next steps for this, which is to take all this and what we've heard and to work with the steering committee to sort of develop this into something that is a bit more of a fleshed out concept with specific ideas around spaces and scales of spaces overall, some more a framework around what the programmatic focus might be, who might be attracted to this, and then in the last phase of the work, put together an actual financial model to test the underlying operations, and to make sure that, as I was talking about earlier, there's alignment between, what it costs to operate something like this and where you might be able to find funds to support that over time. So all of that's still to come over the coming 3 months or so. And I'll stop there, and if I was happy to take questions from those who have them.
Right on. Mahalo, Daniel, Jess, and Catalina. Great work. Before we take questions, members, I want to follow up on my earlier announcement. The BNF committee will start in a few minutes, depending on how the questioning goes. But we have a lot of good information here today. I want to thank Trustee Wahe'e for switching times and accommodating the presenters as well. We don't want to be unreasonable in making you wait if there are testifiers for the next meeting or inconsiderate of your schedule. So we appreciate your time and patience and getting the next meeting started. That being said, Trustee Alapa?
My question is, in regards to the performances or the facilities on the property, how many people, what is the capacity we envision? 400 or 500 people that it can serve? What do you think?
So, I think that's part of what we work out in the next phase, as we sort of take what we've heard from a market perspective and translate that into specific spaces. I would say, just as far as what we've heard from people, I think there's two points that people have focused on. So I think some people we've talked to have actually talked about a space maybe that's even larger than that, so than what you just mentioned. So maybe in the 800 to 1,000 person range, so that you really can have some real larger scale featured events in a space like this. And then maybe people have mentioned a slightly smaller space, not that much smaller, but maybe in the 250 to 400 seat range, so that the space can be a little bit more intimate, and you can feel connected to the performers who are on stage. But I think those are things that we want to make sure that we're testing and coming back with a scale of space that can be sustainable and really serve the creative practitioners as best possible.
Sure, and follow up with that, when you mentioned a smaller venue, would that be a different room specifically for smaller smaller events?
I think that's right. I think that scale of change, I think, may be too much to say, okay, yeah, we can just partition off part of this room or something like that. If you were to say, oh, we're going to go from 1,000 to 800 or something like that, maybe that's the same sort of room, and you can just configure it in different ways. But a 200 or 300 person space is different in sort of scale and usually how it's set up than a 800 to 1,000 person space. So if that's, I don't want to say that's exactly where we're going to land, but if that's where we land, then yeah, you'd think about probably having two separate performance spaces within the overall center.
Trustee Ahuna.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to Daniel, Jess, and Catalina. You guys did a wonderful job, a great job. And I just want to say thank you for that presentation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Period.
Thank you for that. It's been our pleasure. Yeah, it's been a fun 3 months, including some time on the ground. Yeah, look forward. Thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to the work that's ahead as well.
I would like to also mention
Trustee Kaka.
mahalo to the AEA Consulting. I see a lot of, when Trustee Hulu and I had met with you folks, a lot of what our Mana'o and recommendations, I see that incorporated throughout your presentation today, and it's very nice to see how you've put everything together. I wanted to ask Daniel, you had mentioned a steering committee. What does that steering committee consist of?
It's Chair Sousa's on the steering committee, and then let's see, 5 or 6 OHA staff. I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm not going to name all of them on there. Perhaps the chair or others can fill it in, but it's it's a subgroup of this group who's been helping us on a more week-to-week basis, or maybe not that often. I would say bi-weekly, something like that, when we've had meetings with them just to give feedback and make sure that we're connecting with the right people, and we've been doing consultations and things of that nature.
Awesome.
Trustee Galatario.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, folks, for a nice presentation. My question deals with the Native perspective. And how will you folks access that knowledge? Where will you be going to? There's an incredible reservoir of Native knowledge out there. What will your process be to access this knowledge, to embed it into the master plan?
Sure. So, I mean, I think in part we've accessed some of that knowledge through the conversations that Catalina was talking about. That has given us a lot of background, done our reading and things of that nature. I would also say this is the starting point for a lot of this work and not the ending point. So it's not necessarily us who's going to be embedding all of that knowledge. It would be, yourselves or Native Hawaiian peoples who are going to come in and really help develop this. What we want to do as consultants who've worked on a lot of these sorts of projects is provide the framework for that, and to give the outline of something that we've seen have a sort of a long trajectory of success. So we're not here to say that we're the experts in Native Hawaiian culture and therefore are going to develop all of the specific programs that one day will be in this space. That will be done in the people who come in and run it, and honestly a lot of partners, I imagine, who help come in and program the space over time. But it's about sort of creating the mold that those things can fit in.
Just one follow-up, not to be sarcastic, but are you going to put an RFP out for Native Hawaiian knowledge? I mean, I just wanted to know how you're going to access this incredible culture and get to the root. I mean, you could go to the Merry Monarch and you could get all of the hula knowledge, but this is a little bit much broader than that.
Right. Well, I think there's lots of different ways you might do it, and I suppose that's part of where we're getting to in this, really the third phase of work that's ahead is about creating what we would say is the governance model for how you tap into these things over time. Whether it's an RFP for a partner who's going to come in and operate it, whether it's maybe you hire people as the staff who would run a cultural center like this, and then charge them to go out and develop that knowledge over time, and bring in those partners of who's going to operate it. So there's different ways that that might be done, and we can highlight the pros and cons of those things. Ultimately, I guess it's for the entity charged with operating this is to sort of say, okay, here's how precisely we want to tap into that and bring it into the space when it, if and when it becomes a reality.
Mahalo.
Mahalo, Trustee Galatario. Members, any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, AEA. Look forward to the next update. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you. All right, members, the next item on the agenda, adjournment. If there are no testifiers, chair motions to adjourn this meeting. Can I get a roll call vote?
Trustee Ahuna?
Great meeting. I mean, yes. Sorry.
Mahalo. Trustee Kaka? Trustee Kaka? Oh, okay. Trustee Akina?
Aye.
Trustee Alapa? Trustee Alapa? Yes, thank you. Trustee Galutaria?
Aye.
Chair Kahele?
Aye.
Trustee Lindsay? Trustee Waihe'e?
Yes.
Chair Souza?
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Mahalo, members. Thank you so much.
Mahalo.
Aloha.
Well, hey, what time we starting?